Action. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Across the Nation with Jason podcast. I'm here with my dad, most importantly, but also an awesome entrepreneur who has started multiple businesses throughout his career, and is just a really great influence to me and someone that I have as a mentor that I'm incredibly grateful for that I have in my back pocket. If I ever have a business question, I always talk to my dad. That's my first ever, someone that bet on me early on. So I appreciate it. So
Uh,
yeah, so
yeah,
Dad and Jeff, just tell the world a little bit about yourself and your experiences as an entrepreneur and all that stuff.
sure. Well, I'm also very honored to be able to do this and be a part of this journey with Jason. Um, it's really fun to watch and see and listen because there's so much I see in him at 20 years old that I was at 20 years old, and it's there's probably nothing more rewarding for an entrepreneur to be able to watch um, your son or daughter. Um, in those same footsteps. And it's pretty neat to be able to share the ups and downs, the whirlwinds of that journey with your kid. It's pretty awesome. And one thing I've kind of talked to Jason. It's the entrepreneurial journey is pretty crazy. It goes from, hey, this thing goes right in the next 6 months. I'm going to be flying private to, oh my gosh, I'm going to sell everything. I'm going to have to pawn my car, be able to pay the bills. Oh wait, everything's great. We're going to get that jet after all within about a 3-day period. And I think it's kind of a fun be able to journey with your kids like that. It's fun. So a little bit about me. I kind of got the entrepreneurial bug really early in my life. I was about 9 years old when I started selling greeting cards door to door. And I found I had a pretty good knack for it. And actually, it gives me kind of dates me for sure. But I bought my first Nintendo by selling greeting cards and from door to door.
And
And
what Nintendo was that,
that
Dad?
would be the Nintendo Entertainment System.
The NES. Yeah.
The NES, the original one
Yeah.
back in the late 80s, I think 88, 89 time period, somewhere in that. Well, if it was that, actually, I guess I would have been probably 10 or 11 years old, actually, for doing that, the dates that way. But
That's nuts.
and that's what it did, is that you had to sell a certain number and you could get games and a lot of stuff I got because I sold greeting cards. And, it sounds like something, but the reality is it prepared me to handle all the things that the entrepreneurs deal with, from everything from sales, which is probably the most important tool that you could have, to um, simply things like being able to handle no or rejection, and being able to go to the next door and the next door and the next door and the next door. And but I can tell you, as a young person, there's nothing better than that win. There's nothing better than that yes. I can tell you, and I don't think it's changed for me at 43. When I get that yes, it's probably as thrilling as when I got it at 11. And I think the fun part about that journey is exactly that. Is you know, Jason mentioned it, but I've had a little bit of experience in so many different things. I've had experience in everything from the automobile industry, where I really got my start, to finance, to real estate, manufacturing, healthcare, I've franchising. I've really found myself in so many different areas because at the core um, ethos and spirit is simply being flexible, being interested. I mean, I talk to people all the time, like, how in the earth did you get into salons or healthcare or chiropractic care or heck, walk-in bathtubs? The reality is you just know what looks right and you go with your gut. Sometimes your gut is right, and I'd say most in my career, most of my time my gut's been right, and other times it's not. But the reality is that when you learn the basic skills, you can find yourself in so many different um, industries, businesses, things like that. Um, that's a very long
No
statement.
worries.
I'm not sure if that actually answered any questions for you, but that's me. I mean, I love what I do. I think regardless of the amount of money in the bank or anything like that, I love the hunt. I love what I do every single day. It's sometimes a grind, sometimes it sucks, and I want to jump off my house. But the fact is, at the end of the day, I love what I do. And if I had $50 million in the bank, I would still do what I did today. I'd still do it tomorrow. I'd still, because I love it. It's not about the money. It's not about that. It's about that fun experience.
Yeah. Oh, man, I totally hear all that stuff, and I totally realize where I get most of my kind of spunk and moxie from, probably. Because it's like, man, it's like I still remember you would always tell me, like, when I was just selling mattresses at Mattress Firm, it's like, that is experience, Jason. Like, this was the stuff that you're going to be able to call back on. And then here I am. It's when if you're raising like $100 million or you're selling a mattress, the core principles of what you're doing is almost identical. And I think that's something that is not emphasized enough in that, like, in like business schools. It's like, if you can do something really small, you can do a lot of the really big stuff. These like core sets of principles and knowledge that you have, you can apply in almost anything. I think that's what's really cool about your story, that you've shown that, like, hey, I can do cars, and I can do, oil and gas, and I can do, chiropractic centers, and you can kind of have these different experiences that to the outside view, they're going to look like these things have nothing to do with each other. Everyone's going to look at you like you're an idiot and that you're crazy and that you have no idea what you're doing. But these kind of core sets of principles and experiences that you've learned, now you're able to call back on that knowledge and be like, hey, I've been in this spot before. I know where I can go better now from that point on, So yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah.
One of the mentors and the people that I talk to, I speak a lot about, is a perfect example of a person that he is invested in everything from energy to vacation rentals to real estate to medical offices, all pretty much in many different areas, because at the end of the day, the core is finding something that makes sense, that you can believe in, that you believe is going to win. I have a friend who owns everything. He owns a publishing company, salon suites, a trash company, and he just got into integrated medical care and regenerative medicine. None of those things have anything to do with anything else. He goes from selling compactable trash dumpsters for construction franchising to salon suites to stem cells.
Yeah.
And the reality is,
that's nuts.
If you're an entrepreneur, you look for opportunity. And when the opportunities make sense, really doesn't matter what it is. It could be oil change centers or chiropractic offices. It could be Meineke muffler shops, or it could be a home cleaning company. It doesn't really matter. What matters is the core base of your talents and experiences and figuring out what that is.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. That's why I think Ocean is the perfect little business for me, because it's like I have this thing that I created that I can bring a lot of value to a lot of other entrepreneurs, but also I can plug in any business that I like, and if I have an idea, I can go from idea to actual working product and online storefront within 15 minutes, which I just really love. Because it's like, I remember I had this idea for a coffee brand, and I went from idea to actually having like all my social media pages done, having actual products that are ready to sell and ready to go in a day, right? And that's just what I love, is like why I think that this is so cool, because I can apply the same principles that I learned when I was freaking trying to sell mattresses of how I'm going to sell coffee. It's about bringing value to the customer and these like kind of core sets of principles that you then can highlight and have, which I just think is awesome. So yeah,
for sure. Well, one of the one of the things you start to realize in the process is each one of those experiences that you get is a building block for the next thing. I mean, I knew nothing, when I started selling cars, I knew about sales. And then in the act of selling cars, I learned about rapport building and how to develop relationships, how to ask questions and find out what the customers truly wanted. Well, that was great. And that was the first building block. But then I understood, then that moved into, then I owned my own car business. Well, what that turned into is I learned about financing cars. Well, then financing cars turned to internal and inside financing. Once I learned inside financing, I learned, wait a second, I can bundle up these huge books of car notes and sell them to a private equity firm. Well, then I can keep doing that. Well, then I learned finance and I learned factoring, and then I learned that. And then that down the road turned it into banking and securities. Well, banking and securities later down the road turned into oil and gas. Oil and gas taught me how to work inside of the SEC framework, the rules and regulations, all those parts to learn how to raise capital and raise capital properly and legally and morally and ethically, which then led me into private equity. Private equity was the door to open it into anything. And private equity is simply the act of placing money in smart investments.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. So as being little startup Jason, right, trying to figure out how I can go in and fundraise, how would you recommend approaching a private equity or venture capital company? Like what kind of things would you recommend for like a startup that's trying to raise money? What kind of little tips and tricks would you kind of get so your pitch deck doesn't end up on in the to read pile and never gets read? What are things you can do to differentiate yourself?
The number one thing I would
yeah, you're good. Go.
The number one thing I would tell you is you need to have a product that you yourself would put money into. That's it. If you don't have a product that you can show or a proof of concept of a product that you yourself would bet it all on, then don't do it, because you're never going to be able to stand behind it enough to represent it well enough to put it in front of somebody who will see your belief and do it themselves. If you don't believe it in yourself enough and you think, oh, I'm not there yet, then they're going to know you're not there yet. You've got to have something that's so tangible, it doesn't even have to function. It just has to give that belief. They've got to see that you've got something. And if you have that, because a perfect example is oil and gas, okay? In an oil and gas deal, all I have is a plot of dirt with some imaging underground with a hope that the investors hope that I did a good job of looking at the project and making a good call. Now, the reality is that I have to believe in the data from the petroleum engineers and the geologists and all those things, and I have to have good data. If I believe it myself and I would put my own money in, I'm going to be able to talk to an investor about it and say, listen, this is the reality. And in any project and anything that I have done, I have put my own money in. And that's a big part of it. I put my money where my mouth is. You're doing the same thing with Ocean Connection.
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah.
But the key though, is you need to be able to put a product out there, whether it be a video or a pitch deck or something that is such a high quality level that the investor feels the confidence that they're going to write you a check because they believe in you and they believe in what you're capable of. Because at the end of the day, they are not buying Ocean Connection, they're buying Jason.
Oh, yeah.
And I can tell you, if you start reading any of the the books and articles about a lot of the very founding of so many of these small companies,
yep.
There's companies that get money and pivot in the midst of getting money to something completely different. You know, I remember reading Bitcoin Billionaires and they talked about that that all throughout the Bay Area, they would start a pitch deck in one direction, and within 90 days, they're in a completely different business. And that's how a lot of this stuff happens, because you find a niche in the process of building it. And that's what I genuinely believe you're going to find in Ocean, is that what's going to happen is you're really wide open, but you're going to find that one thing that's going to pop. And that one thing is going to pop is going to be the thing that is Ocean. Ocean is going to be that one thing. Mm-hmm. It will grow into other things. Amazon was just a book company. Now Amazon's going to be, I will say within 5 to 7 years, will be the #1 transporting company in the United States.
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah. It's
I mean,
yeah, they hit
you will no longer be FedExing things anymore. You'll be Amazoning them. Mm-hmm. Because it's just what it is.
Yeah.
If I have a better delivery system, a faster delivery system, that's who's going to win. Mm-hmm. And the moment that Amazon can get you stuff within an hour of your ordering, retail will no longer exist in the United States.
You're preaching to the choir here. Yeah, that's the whole kind of basis of what I've really seen in the market. I really think, especially COVID has highlighted this real need for businesses to transition into almost entirely online businesses with maybe a retail element. But in terms of the actual money that's coming in, you got to make sure that instead of being, hey, it's 80-20 for your from your retail storefront to your for your online sales. And that's like if you're a really good business that has a really good online presence, that you're that 80-20 split. I think it's gonna shift, and you're gonna be at like a 95-5 in terms of if you have a retail store and when you're buying products. I just think that there's a big shift here,
I think
especially
that
with delivery, and that's what I'm betting on. That's
the
the whole reason
longer,
I started it. Yeah,
for sure. Well, the
so,
longer COVID and those type things last, the more behaviors are going to be programmed to be different.
yep.
If you're used to carrying out food or food delivery, you're probably not going to sit in a restaurant ever again. Why? Because you're just not. I went to a restaurant for the first time in months, and it was the most weird, surreal experience.
Yeah.
And we're not talking. You're talking to a guy who loves eating out all of the time. I enjoy it. But for me, sitting in a restaurant after months of not, it was weird. I can just tell you that. And I had got so accustomed to eating at home and even getting carry-out food at home. It's going to be very difficult for those businesses to rebound.
Yeah.
I think that, I start thinking about other avenues. The only businesses that are going to not be affected by this are service type businesses that have to still be done in person. Those are the only businesses that are not going to be just utterly disrupted by this whole situation. Nobody, I mean, you still, for if you're getting your house cleaned, someone still's got to come to your house and clean it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you are getting medical treatments, there is telemedicine, but the telemedicine primarily is a evaluation tool. It still involves prescriptions and things like that, which you could do, but there's the hands-on aspect of an exam that won't happen over the internet, at least today.
Yeah, I think that even with that, that's something that I'm really nervous about, because when you think about what's the information that a doctor's getting, right, in terms of like a checkup, like they're checking your heart rate, they're checking your blood sugar, right? They're doing a lot of this stuff. I think we're not that far away from you just sending in a blood sample, right? That you get a little bit of that. It's like with they kind of tried it with that business, the Theranos, right? With the girl.
Well, but that wasn't the same. That wasn't the same deal.
Yeah.
But I can tell you right now, even at our Connected Health locations, we can send you to get blood drawn. Using that blood that's drawn, we can tell you everything from potential food complications, food allergies, all kinds of things based upon one blood test. We can tell you what's going to maximize your weight loss, what's going to keep you the most fit, what food groups are going to be problems for you, all from one blood draw. And I think, and we do that right now in office in Colorado Springs. And I can tell you that there is going to be a point that technology is to the point where you're going to be able to put, a reader on your finger, and it's going to be able to read your pulse. It's going to be able to tell you your O2 content. It's going to tell you all those things while you're also talking to a doctor, just like we're talking, just like now. And they're going to be able to tell you that, hey, we believe you probably have this. Here's what you do. Hey, strep's going around. We're going to send you, you're going to send this culture in. It'll be at your house in about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
You're going to just go do this swab. You're going to drop it right in the box. They're going to pick it up in 25 minutes from your house. And then we're going to send the prescription be dropped off later tonight. When that happens, that is going to revolutionize medical care.
So
the problem with that, though, is I believe that there's going to be a strong group of people that are not going to medicate their life's ailments only using drugs. And that's going to be the differentiator, because the only way that model works is taking a pill. And so that's just another element that I don't know how we got off on the tangent, but again, it comes down to disrupted businesses are, because of COVID, office space is never going to be the same.
Oh yeah. Like
in-person meetings, in-person meetings are not going to happen. Travel, airplane travel, all those things are going to be different, because you're not going to jump on a plane to fly from New York to LA, because you've been meeting, you're going to be by a year from now, you'll be meeting for 2 years on Zoom calls, and nobody's going to be on a plane.
Mm-hmm.
And so business travel is going to be way down. All those things. Now, the problem is, can you make the same emotional connection over a Zoom call that you can in person? I don't think you can.
Yeah, it is
But
hard.
What are you going to do in that moment? And that's another thing that you've got to start thinking about. And that's why I think Ocean, like you're working on, is positioned to do a lot of different things. And you're going to find that one niche, and that's what's going to make the difference.
Yeah, and I think that something that I think people just fall into is that they think that this niche is just like gonna happen by you just like deciding, oh, this is a niche and this is what I'm gonna target, right? It's like I think that you kind of find your niche by trying different things and by looking at different and talking to different people and experimenting, figuring out what works, what doesn't work. Just saying I have a niche, I think is kind of dumb, in my opinion. I think by trying things and figuring out, like in market testing, being like, is this a need for real? Or is this a need that I want it to be a need, right? Like let's say, like, let's use the example of like my coffee business, right? Like I think that there's a need here. I think that I have a really good niche with cold brew locally, right? Like I'm literally just my goal is to try to hustle my face off and try to sell 500 cups, right? Using the subscription model that I have currently set up, right? Sorry, I'm having trouble with my mic. It just fell off the thing.
Okay.
But yeah, but like, so with this coffee business, if I realize that it's not working, like I'll just stop. Like I can figure out what works and what doesn't work by testing and figuring out if there's a niche there, right? Like I talked with someone today that recently got into the TechStars Accelerator, right? And what they do is they provide a vegan supplement that gives you the nutrients from a vegan diet that you normally are missing from meat products, right? That they find vegan ways of getting, like a pill that, like with B12, like it's a supplement that does a lot of those things that ends up falling behind. And it's like, how did they kind of figure out that niche of, like vegetarian stuff? I'd almost guarantee that they tried a bunch of different things and then ended up settling on that much later. Because you figure out where your niche is much later than you really figure it out. Like Uber, with what they did, they started off really being that kind of luxury car service. Now, if someone's trying to call a cab, no one's calling cabs anymore. Everyone's calling an Uber, even if you're really, conscious of price. There's like this really big shift into, I think niches are dumb in the traditional sense, but you testing different shit or stuff, like that's what you got to be doing. Like I'm a big proponent of that. So. Sure. Yeah, and also when you're looking at Amazon, they also are starting an Amazon medical program that is doing just that in terms of delivering prescriptions and all of that stuff.
Sure.
So when you're looking at companies that are really benefiting from the pandemic, it is not small businesses. It is a lot of these big tech companies and a lot of these folks. So right. It's a crazy time to freaking try to raise money right now. Like this is nuts because it's freaking everyone's scared to death. And no one even knows that there's going to be a United States in whatever 12 years. Everyone's freaking out. The world's on fire. And then it's like, here's little me trying to like figure out how to like run a startup. It's like that quote from Batman. It's like, you simply lived in the darkness. I was born in it. That's what I feel like for my company. This is all this stuff that's going on. It's like, I don't understand what it's like to run a business not in a massive worldwide pandemic. Like I don't have that experience like you've had.
Well, but the thing is, you have to think about this, right?
Yeah.
I started in my world. I started a business on September 1, 2001. 10 days later, September 11th happened. Okay. That's one big adjustment, right? Number two, I watched, 7 years later, the collapse in 2008. All right. The collapse in 2008, which is the real estate crisis, CMOs, the Big Short. It's a perfect example of, if you want to learn all about that, and to watch that.
Great book too.
For sure. And then only to watch, other events happen between, but then it's been pretty much a bull market ever since then, and now we're
overdue. Yeah.
We're looking right now at, I think honestly, we're at a situation where things are going to be interesting. We had, COVID hit last year and, and we don't know what's going to happen. I think that we're in for an interesting couple of years here, and I
Yeah.
think we're going to see how it's going to play. And I do think, though, that in spite of everything, this is a time for the right business in the right situation to make a massive impact. I myself, I think healthcare is going to be a big component. I think that people are going to be focused on health. I think COVID has caused a lot of people to consider their own health. I think that, you know, in spite of all this, I think it's one of those things that people are going to start paying more attention to it. And I think they're going to look at more holistic ways to treat themselves, from exercise, diet, working out, than looking at the pill solution, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, it's and also when you look at kind of the conception of what we think of as modern medicine, we look at Rockefeller, in terms of where he funneled money into the education system. I have a massive podcast that I'm actually planning on doing the rest of this week, kind of talking about college and kind of how did college turn into what we know of it today. So when we look at Rockefeller, he would funnel millions upon millions of dollars into these colleges and institutions in order to basically push and basically say petroleum-based pills are the best way to get healthy. And he would push all this stuff and this money there to then emphasize this and de-emphasize a lot of these like Eastern medicines that have worked for a really long period of time. And I just think it's something I definitely recommend checking out. If you look at, there's a documentary, because it's like how big oil rules the world. And Rockefeller literally ended up putting so much money into the education system that it ended up being that there's this massive medicate versus like you medicate the symptom, not the problem, that there's a lot of that in our culture, and 1,000%. I especially think you need to, I think if I was you here, I think you should start bumping out content talking about how to increase immune health, because especially with COVID, that's a massive, massive thing.
Well,
and that's why I think I could kick it in a day, and I think a lot of people couldn't. It's just based on immune health.
Well, I'm making, and that's one, again, part of the reason I'm on your podcast today is my goal is to really step up and make that difference, because I do believe that, talking about these things is the best way to really communicate
and educate.
Yep.
I 1,000% agree. My goal is to try to make it so, like with the podcast, it's like, hey, here's someone that like has gone through these experiences and has actually done it, instead of learning it from a professor that is just like thought about starting a business maybe once.
No, I get it. And I've had a conversation with multiple people, just about you, Jason, and your experience. And
thank you. Yeah.
Well, and the truth is,
yeah.
I mean, the reality is just that. The reality is, I think, honestly, Jason, you probably read more books in the last 24 months than you did in middle school through high school.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, I've seen your notes. I guarantee you took more notes on those books than you ever took in a single class you've ever taken in your life.
Yeah, I was like, I literally had this thing. It was like, why should I give a crap about The Great Gatsby? Like, it's not going to help my life at all. And I just, maybe they should have paid better attention in school. But, I when I'm interested about a thing, it's like what I care about. But yeah, that's definitely true. It's like when I calculated it out. It's like I literally, from the beginning of 2020 to the end of 2020, I read about 50 books. So I read almost a book a week. I was really close to a book a week for almost an entire year. So
that's life changing in growth, and that's life changing in knowledge. I mean, that's the differentiator. So
I know so much more about like people that have tried to do similar stuff to me, right? I know pretty deeply about almost every single big startup that's happened. I know about pets.com. I know about Uber. I know about Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. Like I can tell you like excerpts about all those different companies, and I can tell like lessons that I learned from how they, like what am I going to apply from how did Mark Zuckerberg build Facebook, and what do I want to do differently from him? And what do I want to see that, how did he do stuff really well? Right. And I can find that stuff out and be like, okay, this thing he messed up, this thing he did well, this thing Uber did well, this thing Uber sucked at. Right. Like the fact that Travis Kalanick is not an Uber anymore is honestly that's one of the biggest things that I got out of doing all my research. It's the fact that this guy that founded the company could get kicked out, that's why I'm always going to have protections in terms of how can I maintain like that control of my company, even if I am public, you know? So yeah, it's just crazy. So, but yeah, what other stuff do you want to talk about? What's going on in your world? Like, what's some
Well,
interesting stuff?
so I needed to take a break, and then I can come back to you in a little bit.
Awesome. One sec. We'll pause the recording.